Welcome to Man with a Mentor. I am the man, your host, Matthew Barnard, and you may be wondering what a show called Man with a Mentor may be about. And basically, it's about people who have a driving passion to succeed in something that they want to do for their career and their life, and they stick to it, and they become successful and amazing at whatever that chosen thing is. And my guest today is Zakk Jones. Say hi, Zakk.
How's it going? Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm going to introduce you now.
Okay.
Zakk Jones is an Ohio-based guitarist, band leader, composer, and educator with an MM degree in jazz studies from Bowling Green State University, and he was the head of jazz studies in the Conservatory of Music at his other alma mater, Capital University. Zakk is an avid composer, arranger, writes articles for jazzguitartoday.com, hosts the podcast Beyond the Frets, celebrated his last release, the EP In My Life, in 2022, and all this info can be found at zackjones.com. How's that? Did I wrap it up?
That's beautiful.
There's so
Thank
much
you.
more to you. Like, that was a
Oh,
long intro, and I had to cut it down. So first of all, let's say something unique about you. Is Zakk Jones is Zakk
yes.
Jones.com. Yeah. So I wanted to make that clear and express like that's a unique thing about you. Just one of the many things, because I was listening to samples of your records and recordings, and I just thought this guy has a unique, cool, soulful take on music,
Thank you.
and just take me on that journey of when things started clicking and
Absolutely.
happening with music.
Yeah, so it kind of all goes back to when I was 6. I was at my grandparents' house and they had a piano, and I was just plunking away at it, just finding melodies that I was hearing. And my parents were like, "Oh, he might have some, sort of predilection for this." So they gave me piano lessons. I mean, they took me to a teacher, and I was actually a little reticent at first. Like I wasn't really disciplined. I was 6. So, but I did enjoy it, and then as it kept going, it really became a big part of my life. And my teacher encouraged me to write my own music, so I was writing my own music from a pretty early age. And long story short, when I was about 10 or 11, my dad showed me like Metallica, AC/DC, Van Halen, all the classic like guitar rock gods. And that's when I was like, okay, I should probably get a guitar and put the piano aside. Nothing against piano, but it felt right. And yeah, 20 years later, I've been playing guitar for 20 years now. So that's pretty much consumed me ever since.
How did you think about mastering it, or did it come easy to you, or was it as much hard work as you probably think it really is?
The guitar, it's a very unforgiving instrument, but it's also not. There's a certain place where you can reach where you can actually play quite a lot of stuff. Like it doesn't take too terribly long to be able to play most pop, kind of Western songs with a couple chords and a couple scales and stuff like that. But the way in which I wanted to interact with it was I wanted to be a professional musician. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew that it certainly meant, knowing my instrument in every way, being a consummate musician, being able to read music, being able to improvise and, arrange and compose, know the history, all that stuff. And of course, those pieces all fell together when I actually went to school. Because when I was learning guitar, it was mostly self-taught. And this was even like pre-YouTube. So I was just like printing tabs on the internet. And just it was very very ad hoc, like autodidactic, just like picking random pieces. And I had a few teachers that were very influential in high school that kind of helped me steer me along the way, but it was very much a self-guided experience in the beginning. And I came to it, I guess, naturally, I suppose. But I mean, 20 years later, I feel like now I know what I don't know. So I feel like there's so much more to explore. But I think back when I was high school, I was fairly confident in my ability, which again, I got knocked down many pegs as I got older.
Can you play something for us, like right now?
Yeah,
So
I can do that.
yeah, let's do that.
I've been playing this song called Count Your Blessings Instead of Sheep. It's this old Bing Crosby tune from the movie White Christmas.
So you went through high school and you were learning, like, how did you evolve into like the next steps of education? Did you know you wanted to go into music? Was that a scary route, or did you think like I'll minor in music and like do something else that's more stable and secure, or did you just go for it and say, no, I'm going to do this for my life?
The latter. There was pretty much no question about it that it would be music. And again, I didn't know how or what it meant, or I didn't know the details. I just knew, okay, the logical thing is go to music school. That'll put me in a situation where I'm learning, I'm going to find a community, and, I'm not like out in the world on my own, so to speak. So at the end of high school, I realized, okay, it's either jazz or classical. That's kind of the two routes for, academic music school, so to speak. And I decided I was playing like metal and rock and roll and stuff like that. So I decided jazz was an easier kind of lane to jump into because I was already kind of listening to some jazz from my dad. And, I was kind of starting to get into it. So I got a teacher who actually played like Brazilian jazz on a classical guitar. So I got a classical guitar and was playing all that kind of stuff. So I did like a very much 180. And that, gave me the skills to get into music school. And I went from Portland, Oregon, where I was living, and I very randomly, serendipitously found Capital University in Columbus, just east of Columbus in Bexley, Ohio. And that's where I ended up going.
Oh, wow.
And that's pretty much where everything really set things on fire in a good way, because I was technically good at guitar. I could play well, but as far as my skills as a jazz guitarist, I had very little, if anything. I had no experience playing with other people. I had no experience improvising or playing that style, or knowing the language and all that stuff. So I was thrown in all these ensembles. I was like, what am I doing? So thankfully I had amazing mentors and faculty and friends, both my age and a little older. I kind of just had this whole vertical integration of people from all sorts of different paths and parts of their journey, and they really just pulled me along, and I had an amazing experience.
So were there people that came along and said it would be better if you did this and then you did that and then you improved, or did you just feel like practice equals improvement? And what were some things where people kind of showed you the way?
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, my biggest source of immediate feedback would be my guitar teacher. I had a guitar teacher in at Capitol named Stan Smith. He's a legend. He's been there, still there for 30 plus years, and he definitely gave me everything I need to know, plus more, on an immediate basis, just every week, just kind of guiding me. But as far as what practice looks like, I think there actually is kind of a very toxic, or maybe more on the negative attitude towards practicing, especially in music school, because the assumption is like, oh, like all the greats, they practice like 12 hours a day, so I have to practice 12 hours a day. But that's not tenable. Obviously, you have to like live your life and go to class, and nowadays a lot of got to work and pay for stuff. So I, now being 10 years after school, I understand now that progress is not linear, and that practice, it should be more about quality than quantity. Because like you said, I could sit down with my guitar for 5 hours a day, but it doesn't mean I'm being intentional or have a clear goal or fixing my mistakes or, really kind of getting in there and figuring out what I want to get out of that session. So, and it's very difficult when you're in school because you think of it as this block of time. You have 4 years to go from this to there, and that's it. You kind of like don't see past that. So, yeah, it was difficult. I mean, because I wasn't like a super regimented practicer. Like even though I knew music was my life. Like I've always kind of been like, it's a little more amorphous. Like I don't. Sometimes I'll practice like every day. Sometimes I don't. So and I kind of now I understand I can follow my own process. But in school it was difficult because I had to juggle so much. So it was a huge learning curve. I think I found a balance by the end. But I was not forcing myself to practice 5 hours a day because it didn't work for me.
Being in college and seeing that as like an end goal, and you didn't know what the world looked like after that, was there a weird transition of when you finished there of feeling lost or isolated, or what do I do next, or how did you go from that phase of your life to where you are now?
Yeah, I think that's the first 6 to 9 months after finishing undergrad. That's a very weird time for most people, and especially because I didn't go to grad school right away, so it was just like, okay, here we are. Just like the open landscape of the world is ahead of me. Thankfully, there was a pretty solid overlap because I started to gig and teach and make money with music by my third year and fourth year. So by the time I was like at the end of my last semester, I mean, I was gigging all the time. I was doing all sorts of stuff. I was teaching. So I was making quote unquote my living. My overhead was pretty low at that time. I was making money through music solely and kind of able to figure that out. And as far as leaving school, thankfully, I was not isolated because I had such an amazing group of friends and peers that were either my year or the year above me. So all my best friends were actually 1 year out of school by the time I was done. So they were already like kind of living life as a musician. And, I got to see how they were doing it. And I was playing with them all the time. So I had just a really, really amazing kind of cohort of peers to look at and kind of follow in their footsteps. Was it hard? Yes, absolutely. And there have been many, many times where I wanted to quit. Times where I've done different odd jobs, to make things work. It has not been sunshine and roses at all. But thankfully,
Oh,
at least getting out of school, I kind of knew what it was like to do it.
so you talked about gigging, and is that different from being the leader of your own group or being an independent artist? Like, do you feel like they're three totally different hats, and which one do you like best?
Yeah, so that's kind of the whole conflict that I was facing and many other artists faced is that you want to be an artist and you want to do the art that you want to create, whatever your aesthetic is, whatever the things that guide you and make you excited, make you passionate about it. However, those things don't always give you money. So the things I did for money were perhaps not exactly what I wanted to do as an artist. So I had to either separate it or just start like saying no to certain things to steer me more towards the direction I wanted. But as far as gigging, I mean, yes, filling in with bands if they needed a guitarist to sub, being in bands as a sideman, doing corporate events, wedding gigs, private events, just as a pickup thing, playing solo guitar at art galleries, doing musicals with high schools, local theaters, or like Broadway touring stuff. I mean, it's just anything you could possibly think of where music could be played live. I've probably done it. There's just so many awesome and weird and sometimes strange scenarios where I've played my guitar, and it was great. I do want to go back to your point, like all my time gigging and kind of making money, again, there came a point where I wasn't fulfilled musically, and since all my time was spent doing things to make money because life is expensive, it was taking away from my creativity. So that's when I realized, okay, I want to do music, full time, but the pie chart needs to change. So now I teach as my main, thing, which I absolutely love. I love teaching. So that's when I decided, okay, I'm going to go back at my master's so I can teach at the collegiate level and kind of go that route, which gives me more bandwidth to interact with my artistic side.
Yeah, I
So
was
go
going
ahead.
to ask about teaching, because, like, how does that work in terms of you getting clients? Are they all like at a college? Do you take like high school kids? Are you putting yourself out there for kind of anybody and everybody who might want to learn from age like 10 to 100? And how do you approach like different clients in terms of like where they're
Sorry.
at?
All of the above, as far as students, like my very first venture was like posting on like the Bexley Facebook community group, being like, hey, I'll come to your house and teach your kid guitar. So I did that for a while. I didn't even have a car. I just walked to people's houses and taught their kids guitar. And then that kind of graduated to, okay, there's music studios that hire teachers, and then they basically find the students for you. So they have the space, kind of the brick and mortar space for you, and then they kind of do the logistics. So I did that for a number of places. And then it kind of moved into, um, I got my first adjunct university gig at Mount Vernon Nazarene University out in, well, Mount Vernon, Ohio. So I was the guitar professor there, teaching undergraduate students. And then that kind of led me towards knowing that I really liked working with that population. I mean, I like working with all types of students, but the collegiate level really inspired me because they're at a point where they can technically play the guitar at least to some degree. So we're talking conceptual, just really getting their musicianship up and making them great performers and just kind of preparing them for their time outside of music school or whatever their situation is. I really enjoyed that. So that's kind of what led me to going to grad school where I had a teaching assistantship and all that stuff. But yeah, right now personally, I moved to Cleveland over the summer and I teach online full time. So I teach with a company called Sonora Guitar Intensive. Actually, my role is a mentor. I'm a mentor at Sonora. It's a really cool program. And then I teach remotely at a university in Missouri.
I've talked to some other musicians who play the trombone or the cello or whatever, drums or something, and we all consider those instruments to be part of an orchestra, and oftentimes they go down that route. But the guitar doesn't seem to have that route as much. Was there a part of you that thought like, you know, maybe I should pick up a stringed instrument that isn't a guitar so I could look into going into the orchestral route? Or were you like, that's not me?
No, I never thought that, mostly because I mean guitar fascinates me still. I mean it's absolutely endless the amount of stuff you can do on guitar. It's incredible how much music there is to kind of get yourself involved with that. And I think that's actually the biggest problem with guitar education is that there's no logical stream, there's no logical path. It's like, okay, when you're in seventh grade, you pick up the clarinet and then you get an alto saxophone and blah, blah, blah. And you have all these method books and there's like a very kind of defined way to teach it, like anywhere you're at, mostly in the world. With guitar, it's not that because it's not in the orchestra, it's not in band, it's not in the symphony, etc. It's not in those traditional classical quote unquote Western art music ensembles. So guitarists are either gonna not do anything in school or they get thrown into like jazz band where the level, where like the entry level is very high because you have to read music and like improvise and like know all this stuff. So there's kind of no middle ground, which I really wish there was more of. And I think it's getting better, but guitarists have a very tough time of kind of finding a path that makes sense and is going to serve their goals, unlike other instruments like you mentioned, where there's kind of a clear cut, okay, I'm going to pick this up and here's my route. There's kind of a logical path. But for me, I just think it's more exciting for me because I do so much that it's so widespread. I've played every genre I could think of. Doesn't mean I'm great at all of them, but I've been exposed to all of it, and it's just been so fantastic.
Right. If someone young came to you and you had to dispel any misconceptions or give the best piece of advice that, or the mistakes that you found along the way or roadblocks to, you know, stay clear of, like, what would that look like? What would you tell someone that wanted some good advice and some harsh reality thrown in there?
It's not about you. I mean, if you're wanting to be a performer in any sense, you have to get out of your own head and not be self-absorbed about how you sound and how you're playing is, how you think the audience is thinking how great you are, how you think, your bandmates, whatever. It's about serving the music as a group. Or even if you're playing alone, there's still an audience, there's still another party involved. So it's never just about me, the guitarist. That's the first thing. Like, yeah, I gotta like know how to play. Like there's that. Like I have to like, put the practice in and spend time on that. But when I'm with other people or performing in any scenario, I try my best to relinquish the need to worry about how I'm sounding, because I want to make sure the music is being served best, and that doesn't happen if I'm thinking about myself. That's an extremely hard thing to do, and I don't do it all the time because that's a mindset thing. It's hard to get into, and I learned that very, very, very later on, after with playing with older people and doing so many gigs. I just realized I play better when I'm not thinking about myself. So that's just one big thing. Like, don't always be obsessed with yourself, and kind of just get out of your head. Listen to your bandmates, listen to the audience, listen to the room, listen to whatever is above our instrument. The other thing is, don't let the product like get in the way of the process. For me, I'm very process oriented. Like, I love making mistakes. I love just like trying anything, but I love being very focused about it and intentional. Whether or not what I'm doing is like the greatest thing on earth, like I don't really care, because anything I do, if it has thoughtful intention and some sort of general goal or something I'm looking for, that's going to help me be a better musician and better person. And the last thing I'll say to that last point, music can't be your whole life, because music is only a reflection of what you're feeling inside, and you're feeling things because of the external world. So if I just sit in this room with 13 guitars around me and just play guitar all day, every day, I'm not really going to have anything to say, because I'm not inspired, or I'm not hurt, or I'm not sad, or I'm not happy, or like whatever. I need to have life experiences. So that's a big, and that's again just getting older, like stretching my sense of time. I can understand like, oh, I don't have to like be the best by the time I'm 25, or like have X, Y, and Z, awards or honors or albums or credits or whatever to my name. Like, I want to do this for life, so I need to live my life too.
What's coming up?
Yeah, so I moved to Cleveland over this past summer and kind of have like a big life change, which has been really awesome. And I think next year, well, I'm writing a book. I guess that's the big thing. I'm writing a book on Canadian guitarist Ed Bickert. He was a legendary jazz guitarist that is unknown, but anyone that finds out about him, like, they become obsessed with him, because he was this enigmatic very incredible person and player. So, and there's no literature on him really in any big way. So I'm writing a book about him. That's a new venture. I've always loved writing, and it's kind of been a goal of mine to do a book on him for about 10 years. So that's finally, I'm in a space where I can do that. And then next year I have 2 trio records coming out that I've already recorded. So that'll kind of be my, release as an artist with the trio. And then I'm in a rock band called Doc Robinson, based out of Columbus. And we do a ton of shows. And I know we're going to have a lot of touring next year because we just released a new album. So yeah, those are probably the big things.
All right. Well, I want everyone to find out what you're up to and to listen to what you've put out there already, because it's awesome. I mean, anybody that can play one of these is awesome in my mind, because let's not relive how terrible Matt was at it. But I just think anybody that can take a guitar and like make it hum the way you do is doing something right. So I want people to go to Zakk, Zakk, Jones.com and check out everything that he's done and everything he's got upcoming.